let's see that looks right. Yep. All right. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Apologies, I noticed some of you have joined from Colorado and I titled this UtahSurv Training, but this really will apply to everyone. I'll just use Utah examples. So we'll go over VectorSurv, tools for data management and evidence-based vector control. So let's start here. Y'all do your jobs well. You do a great job at collecting data. You might collect data like adult and larval mosquito counts. You might collect ticks. You might test your arthropods for different pathogens. You might conduct insecticide resistance testing. You might do other data collection as well. But we all know it becomes frustrating to keep track of all of that data, to make sense of it all, and know when to intervene. So that's what VectorSurv can do for you. So what is VectorSurv? I know many of you are probably familiar, at least at a basic level, but VectorSurv is a web-based platform that streamlines the management, reporting, and analysis of data pertaining to mosquito and tick surveillance and control. The main objective of VectorSurv is to make your data more useful to you. At VectorSurv, we don't own your data or anything. You have full control over everything that you do. We just want to make it the most useful that it can be to you. And it's free. So this is something that's been in the works for almost 20 years, which is pretty wild. It launched in 2006, based in California as a collaboration between mosquito control, the Department of Public Health, and UC Davis. So based on the registration questions, thank you all for answering those. It seems like most of you are pretty new to VectorSurv, if not brand new. So we're going to spend the majority of time today focusing on why VectorSurv is useful, but demonstrating how you actually get your data into VectorSurv and what you can do with it. So before we get into that demonstration of getting your data into the system, I just wanted to give you some background on the capabilities of VectorSurv and why it can actually be helpful for your district. So here's a schematic of what VectorSurv is and what it can do. So we'll start here in the middle. It's a big black box, basically just a database. So this is where all the data lives. And the way that you're going to interact with that is through the gateway. So you are entering field data. So this could be surveillance sites, collections, applications, anything like that. You'll notice this arrow goes both ways. Any data you put into the system, you can always export out of the system as spreadsheets as well. So if your agency, I know not every agency does this, but if your agency does pathogen testing, you can also import and export laboratory data. In California, we do a lot of central lab testing. So here at UC Davis, we actually have a central lab that tests a bunch of the samples for agencies in the state. So the agencies can send their samples to us over at UC Davis, and then UC Davis can enter this data into the system for the agencies. VectorSurv is really great because not only does it allow you to manage your data securely in one place, it has a bunch of built-in maps and tools that'll help you make decisions based on the data that you have in the system. So we'll talk about those in a minute. Finally, VectorSurv makes it really easy for you to share and exchange data. It gives you an easy way to export your data for ArboNet. There are a number of public-facing maps that you can embed to put on your own agency websites if you would like. You can give other users access to your data. So this can be other agencies, it can be researchers, it can be anyone. You can add them as a user to your agency. Now there's different ways that you can do this. You can create, you can share, how do I want to say this? You can give give a user just view-only access as well. So say I was a researcher at Utah State and I wanted to work with the Salt Lake City Mosquito Abatement District, analyzing some of their data or working with them on something. But the district was like, we don't really want to give Olivia access to all of our data so she can go upload, change data, whatever. We just want her to have access to it. Salt Lake City Mosquito Abatement District could give me access as a view-only user so that I can see what's going on in their district. This can be really helpful if you work closely with agencies or you have neighboring agencies that you have a good relationship with and you want to see what's going on in their agency, because it might directly affect you as well. So we talked about UtahSurv having built-in interactive maps and tools, and I just want to show you some of those real quick. Without going into too much detail, here's a view of some of our maps. This isn't all of them. Now, some of these maps are public facing, and some of them require you to have a gateway login to view. But these maps will give you a quick visual view as to what's going on. What viruses are we seeing? So we have an arbovirus map that is both in, is in mosquitoes, dead birds, and sentinel chickens, if your state tests those. So you can get an overview of what's going on at any given point. We have a West Nile virus risk map, which is based on the California response plan, but it takes in a bunch of data that's in the system, as well as environmental data to give you an estimate of what West Nile risk looks like on a weekly basis. We have a newly released tick map, and there's also a resistance map for all the bottle bioassays that have been done. You can see what mosquitoes across the country are resistant or susceptible to a bunch of different pesticides. Now, beyond the maps, UtahSurv has a number of built-in calculators. So I don't know how many of y'all were at the RAPVEC training in Salt Lake City in May, but during that training, we talked about action thresholds and when we intervene with mosquito control. And so UtahSurv has these built-in calculators that can help you calculate those metrics. So I wanted to give you an example of how this could work. So using UtahSurv's abundance anomaly calculator, say my agency Olivia Winoker here in California, we have an action threshold that when my agency collects more than 30 Culex tarsalis per trap night in a CO2 trap, we do control. Now that is a not necessarily a action threshold that will work for your agency. It might not even be a very good one, but that's what my agency that I made up right now uses. So say that I have this and my district is gonna do control when I collect this amount of mosquitoes. Now, this is a fairly simple threshold, fairly simple to calculate. Some of them are more advanced, but UtahSurv makes it really easy for me to plot this and see what's happening. And so if I use the UtahSurv abundance anomaly calculator without showing you under the hood or even really how I would use that right now, what I've basically done here is plotted, this is for California, for the Sacramento-Yolo Mosquito Control District in this region in Elk Grove for my CO2 traps, looking at Culex tarsalis females, what is my abundance, so my mosquitoes per trap night. You can see the red line here is my 2023. This is comparing what to the blue line, which is the average of the last 5 years. So we can see that my red spiked earlier than historically, but I can really use this graph to say, oh, in this week we bumped higher than our threshold of 30 Culex tarsalis females per trap night in my CO2 trap. I collected 40. I need to get out there and go do control. So that's how you can use UtahSurv to make decisions based on your agency-defined action thresholds. Now this, we only have an hour here together, so I'm not going to go deep into all the calculators and whatnot, but I wanted to let you know that we have some recorded trainings. I'll share the links to those later on how to use these different calculators. I also led a training last month or so all about understanding action thresholds. So if you're joining this and you're like, we don't have any action thresholds, I don't even really know what an action threshold is, that's okay. A lot of people don't. I have a training on that if you want to view that. So we talked about UtahSurv having a number of maps, built-in calculators. I just wanted to point out also that if you are a programmer or you work closely with programmers or your agency has a programmer, You can also build your own support tools using the UtahSurv API. I'm not a programmer. I won't be the one to help you with that, but we do have folks that can help you if you are interested. Any questions from folks before we move on to actually starting out with UtahSurv and how to start getting your data into the system? You can feel free to unmute or chat, whatever, if you have a question. Okay, great. We'll move on. So we're going to start from the basics of getting your data into UtahSurv. I know many of you said that you've never used the system before or a handful of times. So the bulk of the rest of this time, we will focus on actually getting your data into UtahSurv. Now, there's multiple ways to do this. First, we'll review using the actual UtahSurv gateway, so the forms on the website to input your data. Then we'll go over importing your data using spreadsheets. We won't go over these custom programming and third-party software, but they're here to let you know that these are possible, and we have some documentation as well as people that can help you do that if that's something you're interested in. So first, we'll go over using the UtahSurv gateway. So I will share a different screen. Okay, so this is what the login page to the UtahSurv gateway will look like. If your agency, if you're joining this call and your agency doesn't have an account with UtahSurv yet, we'll talk about that at the end, and I can help you get set up. So when you go to gateway.utahsurv.org, this is what it'll look like to you. This is where you will log in using your credentials. If you ever have trouble, you forgot your username, you can put the email address you would use for that. It'll send you an email to, I think it'll send you your username, and then you can log in, or you can then forget your password. Or if you don't have an account, you can get started. Now, what we're actually going to use today is called the sandbox. So this looks very similar to the gateway, but it's called sandbox.utahsurv.org. Now, the sandbox is what it sounds like. It's a playground environment. So it's a place for us to play with the data, make any changes we want, see how the system works without any risk to actually messing up my data in the system. So here I've logged into the sandbox. I'm using the Salt Lake City Mosquito Abatement District's agency, but anything I do in here today and I demonstrate to you is not actually going to go into the Salt Lake City agency. Now, if you do want your data to go into the agency, make sure you're actually using the gateway. But we usually point people to the sandbox as a place to play around. If it's your first time using the calculators, you can do that and just have at it without being scared. Just a quick note that the sandbox does reset every weekend. So anything I do in the sandbox today is not going to be here next week. Likewise, anything I do in the gateway is not going to show up in the sandbox until next week after the weekend. So we are going to do everything today in the sandbox. I'm going to get rid of the gateway so we don't accidentally do that. So this will look very similar to everyone. Each state has their own name. So we have CalSurv here in California. You have UtahSurv there in Utah. Some of these options will be slightly different for different agencies and users, just depending on what you do. Where we're going to start is with sites. So sites are where you conduct your surveillance operations within your agency. So these are geolocated on a map, and they're usually the first step in establishing your surveillance data in the system. So if we click sites, you'll see we have a menu. These options are the same as this little drop down here. And we're just going to start with creating a new site. Now, UtahSurv is in the process of updating our forms. So the sites, collections, and pools actually have new forms. I'm going to show you how to use that new interface. We will phase out of this older interface in the coming years, but if this is something you're already using, you can continue with. But since many of you are brand new, I would suggest let's just move to the new interface. So you see in this green box, it'll say try the new user interface. Ta-da, it looks a lot nicer. Not only does it look nicer, it's a lot more responsive to screen size. So if you're accessing UtahSurv on an iPad or a phone, this form will work a lot better than the old form. It wasn't quite formatted to work on different aspect ratios. So we'll start with this, creating a site using the new interface. This tells us fill in the form below to create a new site record. Note that the site code must be unique. So you'll also notice that some of these fields are required, indicated by the asterisk. Some of them are not. This date range, which is the first thing up here, is basically when is this site active? You can ignore it fully for now if you're just creating a site that your agency is going to do surveillance at. We basically added this in case 2 years from now, you're getting rid of this site that you created in this neighborhood and you want to reuse that site code number, or if you move the site or whatnot, this is a way for you to revise that in the future. We're not going to go over that today. We have a video on our YouTube about revising sites, but since many of you, this is the first time you're using the system, you're not going to be revising sites quite yet. So let's stick with what's basically important right now. So what that is creating our site code. So each site has to have a unique 6-number code. Over here on the right, these dropdowns will tell me what site codes my agency has used, as well as what site codes are available in my agency. If you just want to use the next code available, you can just click on it and it'll populate into the site code. Now you'll see site name is not required, but I suggest that you use it. This can be easy, can be helpful for searching for your sites later, or if you have a different system that you use for naming sites, this will always be tied to the site code. Now we can put in our latitude and longitude of the site, or we can use the map to determine that latitude and longitude for us. Now we can use the search on the map to search for an address if we want. So here I'm taking us close to the Salt Lake City Mosquito Abatement District. If that's not actually really where I want to be, I can move this. Say I'm collecting here. If we're more residential, maybe we're over here. And I know that I'm around this address, but I want to see exactly where I place this trap. I can use satellite and say, okay, I know I placed it under this tree on the street, for example. Every time I move this, it'll change my latitude and longitude as well. Now this precision is there for your use. You can use it or not. Generally, when we place a trap, we know the exact place that it was put. If you're creating sites for historical data, for example, say your agency has data from 5 years ago, you know it was generally in this area, I could change this precision to be approximate. If I only know that this data came from the city of Salt Lake City, I can put it at the city level. You can do what works best for you. So we're going to leave it as exact. One nice thing also on this map is that we can show which sites already exist within my district. So might be helpful if you know, oh, I already have sites here and here. I don't actually want to create a site that close by or whatnot. It can just be helpful to see what surveillance you're doing within your district. Now down here, you'll see that these are not required fields. You can put the address in if your agency uses that. You don't have to. It's geolocated with the latitude and longitude already. If you want to put the address, you can find that directly by clicking on your point. It'll tell me the address if I wanted to fill that in. You'll know what's useful for your agency. Similarly, you can classify the surroundings of the site. Your agency might be interested in doing analysis later of mosquitoes you find in areas that are classified as marsh swamp versus residential or whatnot. I'm gonna leave it blank for now, but you can do that if it helps you in your agency. I think for elevation, I could click this, yep, and it'll tell me what the elevation my site is at. Again, might be useful to you, might not. So we've created this, this site. Let's go ahead and save it. So we'll get this green box up here saying the site was successfully saved. That's all you have to do to create a site. Now I can go in and manage my sites if I would like. So again, in the menu, instead of new, I'll click manage. This will give me a view of all of the sites that I've created. I've created this training site we just created. I could go in, click that pencil, and then edit this if I made an error or I wanted to add a comment or whatnot. When we go to our managed sites, you'll notice that some of these don't have the ability to delete them, whereas some of them do. So that red trash can only shows up for some of them. You can't delete a site once there are records associated with it. We wouldn't want to do that, of course, right? So if I just created this training site and I don't remember which number I chose. I think it's on here. I can just search for it here. Oops. I just created this training site. If I didn't actually want to keep it, I could delete it. So that's all we're going to talk about related to sites. And we'll move on to using the gateway forms to input a collection. Any questions folks have on sites before we move on? Okay, great. So we've just done the site module. We're going to move on to the arthropod module. You'll see there's a little image of a mosquito. This is really the mosquito module, but it's titled arthropod in case your district does things with yellow jackets, for example, and you keep track of those. You can add that information here as well. What I'm going to point out first is this config. So because UtahSurv is used across the country, there are a lot of species in the system and a lot of trap types that your agency probably doesn't use, will never run into that mosquito species. So we can use this configuration just to make our options for our district a bit smaller and make this less overwhelming and a little less clunky. So if I want to go to configuration and I want to configure what species are available, I can click that and I can go through and select, I know what 80s I find in my area or I'm likely to find. You can always change this later. So if you don't find a gypti in your district and you don't have it as an option, you can always add it back as an option later. So this just makes, you'll see later when we use our drop-down menus for what we found in our traps, it'll just make it so that they're actually only the mosquitoes that you find in your area. So we're going to go back here. So that was under our config for available species. Now I do want to mention that this gets applied to your whole agency. So if you work at an agency and somehow you're split between, I'm the person who does all the trapping for urban 80s mosquitoes and somebody else does all the rural, and they'll never find 80s aegypti and where they're at, you still want to make sure that you're leaving those species available because it will apply to your whole district. Similarly, you can configure which trap types your agency uses. So you can go down and select which trap types you use. Our agency never uses mammal-baited traps, so I don't want to have that in the system. It's just for ease of use. Okay. So that's our configuration. We're gonna go move on to arthropod abundance. So this is our mosquito collections. So let's go abundance, new. And this is how we are going to enter a new arthropod collection. So we'll say collection date is today. You can also use this slider to use start and end dates if you want. Here's where we're going to enter our site code. So this is what we just created. So say I don't remember the 6-digit code, but I remember that I called it training. I could put that in, and that's the code that I use, 000044. But having that name attached to it made it really easy for me to find. I'm going to leave my precision as exact. You can pull up the map here, which will verify that that's the site you meant to choose. You'll see this blue circle, which is sort of our buffer zone around the trap. What you can do is you can actually move this trap within this buffer zone and still call it the same site. So for example, I normally do my routine trapping under this one tree on the street, but this week there's construction and I can't access this corner. But I'm still interested in what's going on, and I'm moving my trap to this corner just for this week. I can do that. Now, if I tried to move my my trap outside of the buffer zone, I'm going to get an error. And it's saying that the marker has been moved outside of the current site boundaries for this training site. Would I like to use a one-off zero site? So I just briefly want to talk to you about what zero sites are. Exactly what it says. These are one-off. So your site code is going to be 000000, but that allows you to put your trap anywhere. Now, you might use these when you're responding to a service call, for example, or if you get a case of West Nile in an area and you're doing intensive trapping, you might just use zero sites because you're not creating sites that you're planning on doing routine surveillance at. So if it's not a regular trapping location, you might not want to create a site, and you might just want to use a one-off zero site. So when I do that, it's going to change my site code to all zeros, and then I can place this anywhere I want. We'll just leave it at that for now, because for this purpose, it doesn't really matter. Okay, then we can choose what trap type we used. When you configure your trap types, you should only see the ones you use here. The reason I see them all is because I'm actually acting as an administrator in the system right now, so it's showing me everything. But when you configure for your agency what you use, it will only show what you use here. You can also search. So let's say we're using a BG Sentinel trap. Our lures, we can add multiple lures if we want. Let's say I use a BG lure and I'm also using CO2. I could even be more specific with my CO2. I know in Salt Lake City they use pressurized gas, so maybe I'm using that also in this trap. I can if I placed more than one trap. So for example, if you're doing this in response to a case or a service call or whatnot, maybe you're placing multiple traps, you can change that here. You can add who this was identified by. It's not required, but sometimes useful. And you can indicate if the trap ran with any problems. So this could be like the fan broke, there's a dead battery, whatnot. If there is, I can check it off, and I can create a comment. I can say fan wasn't running when I picked it up, for example. This is just free text for you. And again, if later you're looking through your collections and you want to see what happened here, or you're exporting this as an Excel sheet, these will get exported as well. So that's our collection. I'm going to click save. So you'll know that we put in what trap we put out when we collected it or whatnot. We haven't put in anything about what mosquitoes we identified. The reason that you're able to save the collection before you add any species counts is maybe you have different people doing this. Maybe one person is just out there collecting the traps and going to put this in, and then somebody in the lab is later going to identify what was collected in that trap. So you can do these at the same time, or you can just save the collection and then come back later and add the species counts once you have actually identified them. So once we're down here, say I'm here the next day and I'm counting my mosquitoes, I can add in here what I found. So we're using a BG, so I'm going to say that I collected 80s. I know this is not going to happen in Salt Lake right now, I don't believe, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to do this. Again, we're using the sandbox playground environment. When I save this collection, when I save these species accounts, it's not going to show up for the real gateway. So I'll say I collected 80s Aegypti. My district just counts females as females, so I'm going to say mixed. Your district might actually separate blood feds. You might be interested in that data, you might not. So let's say we collected 3 80s Aegypti females and I add that species. I'm going to get a little red drop down saying abundance was successfully added, and we'll also see it down here. Let's say we collected also 6, well, not 65, 6 males. We can add that. Now, so we just created this new collection under abundance. Let's go to manage and we can just see that collection that we just created. Maybe it's going slow.
Olivia.
Yep.
Well, that's now that it's loaded, is there any way to because my district, we just do the females and there's all that list and everything. Is there any way to just like with the other mosquitoes, just click on what mosquitoes we have? Is there any way to go and just put on that?
For the sex?
Yeah.
I don't believe so. But I will check.
Okay.
Yeah, that drop down is pretty small already, but I'll double check.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. Just curious if there was. Thank
Totally.
you.
Yeah. All right, so here is our collection that we just collected. We can see it here. If we wanted to edit our collection, we can go ahead and do that. It's going to look the same as when we were creating it, but if I made a mistake and I actually didn't use CO2, and I was just using the BG lure, I can go back and update that collection. Let's see. So that's all we're going to talk about in terms of using the forms. I do just want to point out there's a form for mosquito pools. I know many districts don't do arbovirus testing quite yet, so we're not going to review that in this short time that we have together today. We do have a lot of videos on our YouTube page that walk through all of this as well. So if your district does use pools and you want to learn more about that, you can watch a YouTube, or if you want a live demonstration just like this one, send me an email. We'll do another demonstration. We can talk about pools, we can talk about ticks, we can talk about the calculators or whatnot, if you all want that. I didn't want to make today too overwhelming since many of us are just getting started. So let me stop sharing this screen also. We're going to go back to the PowerPoint. Oh, no, we're not. Taking you for a ride here. I am going to show you a different way to import data. So maybe your agency already uses spreadsheets for your data collection. And you're like, Olivia, I do not want to go in and have to add every collection individually into the system this way. Great news for you. You don't have to do it this way. You can use spreadsheets to import your data. So we are going to go to Tools, Data Tools, Data Import. This is what our current gateway looks like before we're moving to the new version. If you were in this legacy gateway site, the tools are here, Tools, Data Import. This will allow you to import data using spreadsheets, and then they will show up in the system the same way. You can go in and manage them the same way as if you had just created them using the forms. Now, to be able to do this, you have to make sure that the database can read your form. So you can't just upload any old form. I wish I could tell you that you could, but there are specifications on how you need to do this. Let me actually just share my whole desktop over here. Okay. So that I can show you. Great. So on our drop down here, there are a bunch of different import types. We could import sites. So just as I showed you earlier how to create sites using the gateway form, you could use a spreadsheet to upload a bunch of sites at once. You can do collections, pools, tick collections, all kinds of stuff. Now, if you want to use the spreadsheets, your best friend is going to be this import specifications workbook. I'll pull that up so you can see what it looks like. So this is a spreadsheet, a workbook with a bunch of different sheets down here that are basically telling you how the system reads data. So it'll tell you what acronym to use for which trap type, which acronym or what you can use for the lures, how you spell the different genera and species, what the disease target acronyms are to use, and whatnot. What's really helpful here is that there are some sample sheets. So this down here says sample surveillance sites. This is a sample sheet of importing surveillance sites. So if you wanted to import a bunch of sites at once, just use this sample spreadsheet and modify it to make sense with your data. Same goes for collections. This format will be read by the system. So to demonstrate that to you, I created a different sheet. So I basically took this sample surveillance sites, and I'm just creating a new site, a new sheet here for our sites. You zoom in so you can see this. So if I want to create a new site for Salt Lake City mosquito control, I know my agency acronym is SLCM. Site code, I'm going to create a new one. Again, if I don't know which site codes I used, I can go back to sites and I'll see my drop down of what's available. So I have 217 available and then 233. So let's create another one. 233. We'll call this another training site. I can add the latitude, longitude. This I copied from before because I don't know what they actually are, but let's just change this slightly. Just so we can demonstrate these are different places. Again, coordinate precision, this is the same as what I showed you on that form. If I just don't know if it's exact or if I know it's the city, I'm going to just put city here. And then similarly to what how on the form not all of this was required, again, it's not required here. So all I really need to input is this agency I'm uploading for. If you only have credentials for one agency and you try to upload for another agency, it's not going to let you. So you have to use your agency code. But say you are somebody who helps out a neighboring district with some of their UtahSurv use or whatnot, and you have access, I could import, if I had access through the gateway to another agency, I could add things. If I had access as a user, not only as a view only, I could also upload for them. But let's keep it simple. Uploading to Salt Lake. These are my site numbers, my names of them, and my latitude, longitude. So I'm just going to save that as Salt Lake City training sites and show you how that'll work here when we import that. So we'll go tools, data import, import type, surveillance sites, choose the file, import preview. It's going to preview what that looks like. I can make sure it looks right. It does. And then I click, it'll walk you through what to do. Click on the import test button to start validating the set. If the data set is particularly large, this may take some time. Ours is very small. So said all rows pass the test. Please click import commit to proceed to the final step. Import commit. I don't know why you have to do it twice, but you do. The import of the data set completed successfully. So what does that mean? I should now have sites that are called training site 2 and 3. So let's go make sure that happened correctly. So we're going to go in and manage our sites. And I'm going to search training. And there we are. We just imported training site 2 and training site 3. We used the code 210 and 217. And that's it. It has my latitude and longitude correctly here. And I can edit them if I wanted to add more information or whatnot. And I didn't do that in the spreadsheet. I can go in just like I would if I created my site in the forms here. You can do the same thing, tools, data import. You can do the same thing for collections. So your agency might already use a spreadsheet that looks something like this. You might need to reformat slightly or just change the acronyms or whatnot. I do want to mention these don't need to all be in this exact order. If you use slightly different order, the column names have to be the same, and the acronyms have to be readable by the database. But if you were using collections, you could go in and just use this sample collection sheet to start using for your agency. Now, this can be a little bit confusing, a little bit tricky. If you have troubles with this, but you really want to streamline your process and upload spreadsheets, reach out to us and we can jump on a call. We can help you make sure that this is set up in the correct way so that you can use this function. I personally think that this function is really great and wonderful. And if I were running an agency, I would probably use the spreadsheets. I think it makes it faster. But I know some agencies really like to click through the forms and do it that way. So whatever works. You also don't have to do it agency-wide. If you have one user who wants to use the forms and one who wants to upload spreadsheets, great, do it that way. That's fine. So again, your best friend for the imports are going to be this import specification workbook, which will walk you through how that works. Now, if you're a programmer or you work with a programmer and they want to use the UtahSurv API or web services, there's documentation here as well. I'm not going to review that. I don't know how to do it. Okay, the last thing that I want to show you in terms of tools is data export. So we just imported data. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this training, any data you put into the system, you can get out of the system. So one way to do that is by using export data. And so this looks really similar. I could export surveillance sites. If you do dead birds, carcass reports, arthropod pools, whatnot. Say we just want to export surveillance sites. I can then add a filter. Now, I'm acting as an administrator, so I have access to all these agencies. You'll likely only have access to the one agency you belong to, or if another agency has given you access, you might have multiple. So let's go find, oops, U comes after that. Salt Lake. I want to export as an Excel. And then it's exporting all of my sites here. So if I wanted to look at this, there, it's exported all my sites. So you might use another software that you want all this information for. Your board might ask you for this information or whatnot. So there's always a way to get the data out of the system as well. Okay. Now, as we're wrapping up, I know many of you said that this is your first time, or you've never used VectorSurv. I'm not sure if all of you even have agencies set up yet. So I did want to just point out that there is a VectorSurv starting guide. It's vectorsurv.org/starting. It'll walk you through everything from how to, let's go, let me just show you from here, getting started. How to get started with a new agency, what information you'll need, what agency manager information. If your agency already has an account, but you are new, you can also go to the starting guide to learn starting as a new user for an existing agency. It'll tell you a bit of information about this. It explains what the gateway is versus the sandbox. Again, the sandbox is that playground environment. It'll walk you through different ways to import data. So again, using that Excel or CSV, how you can do that. And then it talks a bit about web services and exporting data as well. While we're here, I just want to show you that we have documentation for all of VectorSurv. So if at any point you forget how to create a new site and you go to vectorsurv.org/docs, go to sites, new site, there's step-by-step instructions on how you can do that in the system. Now this is for the legacy gateway. So before we move to the new interface, which we're calling V5, there's also documentation on how to do this in the new interface. We also, as I mentioned, so that's the vectorsurv.org/docs. That'll be a really good resource if you run into questions. We also have hosted quite a few trainings, and those have all been recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. So these are broken down into smaller segments. So there's a playlist called how to use the VectorSurv gateway. It's broken down into videos for each section of the gateway. So if you forget how to do something, you can always go and watch step-by-step instructions or go to vectorsurv.org/docs to read step-by-step instructions. So our website is vectorsurv.org. We have a newsletter. This is what's most important. Our email is help@vectorsurv.org. That gets sent to the whole team, and then the right person will respond to you. So if it's a program specific question or a bug or something you're running into, I won't be the person to respond to that. But if it's questions about interpretation of data, I might be the person to respond to that. So if you ever run into an issue, we really encourage you to reach out to us. We are here to help. We are happy to jump on a call. We're happy to send emails. We want this system to be the most useful to you. And we know as we expand VectorSurv and different states are using it, different states, different agencies interact with their data slightly differently. So we want to hear your feedback anytime of how we can make this better to serve you, or if you're just running into issues. So this is our team. You might run into some of these folks at conferences or whatnot. And with that, I will end my section and leave about 10 minutes for any questions folks have. Again, if you're like, I really was hoping in this session we were going to talk about using the calculators, let me know. We can set up another call. I tried to keep this basic to getting started with the system to hopefully have you all feel more comfortable with it.
Thanks so much, Olivia. This is great. I'm really excited to have more people interested in VectorSurv. And I know at the state level, it's been really helpful to export data from all of the agencies. And so if you are creating a new agency, I just want to remind you to let me know. And if you could give me view access so that I could export your data for the weekly and annual reports that I put together. And I'm excited to use VectorSurv for ticks. Since at the state level we do tick surveillance, so all the maps look super cool. So I'm very excited to start using that this year.
Good.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm excited that we finally got on board with the ticks, and that's new for us, and I'm also really excited.
Yeah, no, it looks awesome. Any questions for Olivia, anyone? Cool. Well, thanks so much again for your time.
Of course, yeah.
And
So I recorded this, and I'll share the link with you, Casey, and you can share it, and I'll send a follow-up email actually to everyone who registered with this link,
perfect.
as well as some links to the resources and whatnot. And again, feel free to reach out to me personally or to help@vectorsurv.org as you get started and inevitably run into questions. That's normal. Don't feel embarrassed. It's a big system.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks all. See you later.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.